My name is Sarah, and this is my story. I'm sitting here in my small apartment, the rain tapping softly against the window, and it feels like the right time to share this with you. I've been quiet for too long, holding this weight in my chest, but now I want to open my heart. This is the story of how I fell in love, how I was broken, and how I found myself again. It's not an easy story to tell, but I hope it touches you, maybe even helps you in some way. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, where the summers were warm and the winters were bitter. My family wasn't rich, but we were close. My mom worked as a nurse, and my dad was a mechanic. They taught me to be kind, to work hard, and to believe in love. I was a dreamer, always reading romance novels and imagining a life filled with love and adventure. By the time I was 25, I was working as a teacher's aide at a local elementary school, saving up to go back to college and become a full-time teacher. Life was simple, but I was happy. Then I met David. It was a chilly fall evening at a local coffee shop. I was there with my best friend, Emma, sipping hot chocolate and laughing about some silly thing that had happened at work. David walked in, and I swear, it was like something out of a movie. He was tall, with dark hair that fell just over his eyes, and a smile that made my heart skip. He was wearing a leather jacket, a little worn but stylish, and he carried himself with this quiet confidence. He ordered a black coffee, and when he turned around, our eyes met. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like the world slowed down for a moment. Emma noticed me staring and nudged me. "Go talk to him," she whispered, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I laughed nervously, my cheeks burning. "No way," I said, but she wasn't having it. Before I knew it, she was waving him over, pretending we needed help with something on her phone. I wanted to sink into the floor. David came over, and his voice was warm like honey. "Need a hand?" he asked, smiling. Emma made up some excuse about her phone not working, and somehow we ended up talking for hours. He was charming, funny, and so easy to talk to. He told me he was 28, a freelance photographer who traveled for work, capturing moments for magazines and websites. He showed me some of his photos on his phone. Beautiful landscapes, smiling families, vibrant city streets. I was hooked. That night, he asked for my number, and I gave it to him without hesitation. We started texting, then calling, and soon we were meeting up whenever he was in town. David was different from anyone I'd ever met. He listened when I talked, really listened, and he made me feel like I was the only person in the room. He'd bring me little gifts. A flower he picked on his way to meet me. A postcard from a place he'd visited. I fell hard and fast. 6 months later, he proposed. It was simple. Just the two of us by the lake near my parents' house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, and he got down on one knee. "Sarah," he said, his voice shaking a little, "I don't know what my life was before you, but I know I want you in it forever. Will you marry me?" I was crying before he even finished, and I said yes without a second thought. It felt like my life was finally falling into place. We got married in a small ceremony at the town church, surrounded by family and friends. I wore a simple white dress, and David looked so handsome in his suit. My mom cried. My dad gave me away, and Emma was my maid of honor, whispering jokes to keep me from crying too much. That day I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. I thought I knew David, thought I understood the man I was promising to spend my life with. But I was wrong. Looking back, there were signs, little things I brushed off because I was so in love. David was private, almost secretive, about parts of his life. He didn't talk much about his family, saying they weren't close. He'd sometimes disappear for days, saying it was for a photography job, but he'd be vague about where he was going. I trusted him, though. I told myself he was just independent, a free spirit. I didn't want to be the kind of wife who questioned everything. Our first year of marriage was a dream. We moved into a small house just outside town, with a little garden I loved tending. David was sweet, always surprising me with little notes or breakfast in bed. We'd stay up late talking about our dreams, me becoming a teacher, him maybe opening a photography studio one day. We laughed a lot, danced in the living room to old songs, and planned for a future with kids and a dog. I thought we were building something real, but then things started to change. It was subtle at first. David started taking longer trips for work, sometimes a week or more. He'd come back tired, distant, like something was weighing on him. When I asked what was wrong, he'd smile and say it was just stress, that he'd be fine. I wanted to believe him, so I did. But the trips got more frequent, and he started getting calls at odd hours. He'd step outside to take them, speaking in hushed tones. I'd hear bits and pieces, words, like deal or not now, but I didn't want to pry. I told myself it was work, that he was just busy. One night I couldn't take it anymore. He'd been gone for 2 weeks, longer than usual, and when he came back, he barely looked at me. I waited until we were in bed, the room dark except for the moonlight coming through the window. "David," I said softly, "is everything okay? You seem different." He turned to me, his eyes soft but guarded. "I'm fine, Sarah, just work stuff. You don't need to worry." He kissed my forehead, and I let it go, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. That was the beginning of the cracks in our perfect life. I didn't know it then, but I was about to uncover a truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my husband. The next few months were a blur of doubt and confusion. I tried to keep things normal, focusing on my job and my garden, but the unease in my heart grew. David's trips became more frequent, and when he was home, he was distracted. He'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at his phone, his fingers tapping nervously. I'd ask about his day, and he'd give me short answers. Like he was hiding something. I started to feel like a stranger in my own marriage. One evening, I was cleaning the house while David was out on another work trip. I was vacuuming under the couch when I found a small notebook, tucked away like it had been forgotten. It wasn't mine, and my heart sank when I realized it must be David's. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the cover. I'd never been the type to snoop, but something told me I needed to know. I opened it and my breath caught. The pages were filled with names, dates and numbers, hundreds of them, written in David's neat handwriting. Some names had addresses next to them. Others had words like delivered or pending. It didn't look like anything related to photography. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages, trying to make sense of it. Was this some kind of code? A list of clients? Or something else entirely? I put the notebook back where I found it, my mind racing. That night, when David came home, I watched him closely. He was tired, his eyes shadowed, but he smiled at me like nothing was wrong. I wanted to ask about the notebook, but fear stopped me. What if I was wrong? What if I accused him of something and ruined everything? I decided to wait, to watch, to see if I could find more answers. Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own home. I noticed things I'd ignored before. How David always locked his phone. How he'd get jumpy when I walked into the room while he was on a call. One day I checked our bank account. Something I rarely did because David handled our finances. There were deposits, large ones, from names I didn't recognize. Thousands of dollars coming in and out with no explanation. When I asked David about it, he said it was payment for a big photography project. But his eyes didn't meet mine, and I knew he was lying. The doubt ate at me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I started losing weight, my clothes hanging loose on my frame. Emma noticed and pulled me aside one day. "Sarah, what's going on? You don't look like yourself," she said, her voice full of worry. I broke down, telling her everything. The notebook, the money, David's strange behavior. She hugged me tight and said, "You need to talk to him. You can't keep living like this." I knew she was right, but I was terrified. What if the truth was something I couldn't handle? What if David wasn't the man I thought he was? But I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. So one night when David came home, I confronted him. We were in the kitchen, the air heavy with tension. "David," I said, my voice trembling, "I found your notebook, and I saw the bank account. What's going on? Please, just tell me the truth." His face went pale, and for a moment he didn't speak. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Sarah, it's not what you think," he said. "The notebook, it's just work stuff. Clients, payments, that kind of thing. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to stress you out." "Clients?" I said, my voice rising. "David, those don't look like photography clients. And the money, where's it coming from? Why are you lying to me?" "I'm not lying," he snapped, his voice sharp. I flinched and he softened immediately. "I'm sorry, Sarah, I've been working on some side projects, okay? Things I didn't want to bother you with. Can we just drop this?" But I couldn't drop it. The more he dodged my questions, the more I felt like I was losing him. That night, I lay awake, listening to him breathe beside me, wondering who he really was. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed him. He said he was going to a shoot, but I had a sick feeling in my gut. I borrowed Emma's car and trailed him, keeping my distance. He didn't go to a studio or a park or anywhere a photographer might go. Instead, he drove to a run-down warehouse on the edge of town. I parked far away, watching as he met a man in a black car. They talked for a few minutes, and then David handed him a small package. My heart pounded. What was he doing? I went home, my mind spinning. Was David involved in something illegal? Drugs? Smuggling? I didn't want to believe it. But the pieces were starting to fit together. The secrecy, the money, the strange meetings. It all pointed to something dark. I felt like I was drowning in questions, and the man I loved was at the center of it all. I couldn't keep living in the dark, so I decided to dig deeper. I started checking David's phone when he was in the shower, something I hated doing but felt I had no choice. I found texts from unknown numbers, vague messages about pickups and drops. One said, "Make sure it's clean this time." My stomach churned. What was he involved in? I also started looking into his photography jobs. I called one of the magazines he said he worked for, pretending to be a client. They had no record of him. My heart sank further. If he wasn't a photographer, what was he doing all those times he was gone? Who was paying him? One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until David was asleep and went through his laptop. It was password protected, but I guessed it after a few tries. It was our wedding date. What I found made my blood run cold. There were emails, dozens of them, from someone named V. They were cryptic, talking about shipments and contacts. One email mentioned a job that needed to be done quietly, with a promise of a big payout. There were also photos, not of landscapes or families, but of packages, warehouses, and men I didn't recognize. I was shaking as I closed the laptop. My husband, the man I loved, was living a double life. I didn't know what he was doing, but it wasn't good. I felt betrayed, scared, and so alone. I wanted to confront him, but I was afraid of what he might do. What if he was dangerous? What if he wasn't the man I thought he was at all? The next day I called Emma and told her everything. She came over, her face pale as I showed her the notebook and told her about the emails. "Sarah, you need to get out," she said. "This isn't safe. You don't know what he's capable of." But I couldn't just leave. I loved David, or at least I loved the man I thought he was. I needed answers, needed to know why he'd lied to me. So I made a plan. I'd confront him, but I'd do it carefully, in a public place where I'd feel safe. I chose a park near our house, a quiet spot where we used to go on dates. I asked David to meet me there, saying I just wanted to talk. When he arrived, he looked tired, his eyes heavy with something I couldn't read. We sat on a bench, the autumn leaves falling around us, and I took a deep breath. "David," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "I know you're not a photographer. I found your notebook, your emails. I know about the money, the meetings. Please, just tell me the truth. What are you doing? Who are you?" For a moment he just stared at me, his face unreadable. Then he sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, "I never wanted you to find out like this." "Find out what?" I pressed, my heart pounding. He looked around like he was making sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "I work for an organization," he said. "It's complicated. I can't tell you everything, but it's not what you think. I'm not a bad person, Sarah. I'm trying to do something good." "Good?" I said, my voice rising. "David, you're lying to me. Sneaking around. Meeting strange people in warehouses. How is that good?" He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes pleading. "I can't explain it all now, but I promise I'm not hurting anyone. I'm helping people. You have to trust me." "Trust you?" I said, tears spilling down my cheeks. "How can I trust you when everything I know about you is a lie?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Sarah, please," he said. "I love you. That's real. Everything I've done, I did to protect you." "Protect me?" I said, standing up. "You're breaking my heart, David. I don't even know who you are." I walked away, leaving him on the bench, my tears blurring the world around me. I didn't know what to do, where to go. My whole life felt like a lie. The days after our confrontation were a haze. I moved out, staying with Emma while I tried to figure out what to do. David called and texted, begging me to come home, promising he'd explain everything, but I couldn't face him. I was too hurt, too confused. I needed time to think, to decide what I wanted. Emma was my rock, listening to me cry, helping me make sense of it all. She urged me to go to the police, but I wasn't ready. What if David was telling the truth? What if he was involved in something dangerous but not bad? I didn't know what to believe anymore. One night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. It was a woman's voice, low and urgent. "Sarah," she said. "You don't know me, but I know your husband. You're in danger. Meet me tomorrow at the diner on Main Street, noon. Come alone." My heart raced. "Who are you?" I asked, but the line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, fear and curiosity battling inside me. Who was this woman? How did she know me? Against my better judgment, I decided to go. The next day, I sat in a booth at the diner, my hands wrapped around a coffee mug. A woman slid into the seat across from me. She was older, maybe in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a tense expression. "I'm Lisa," she said. "I used to work with David." "Work with him?" I said, my voice shaking. "Doing what?" She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "David works for a group that helps people escape dangerous situations, abusive homes, trafficking rings, things like that. He's a courier, moving money and documents to keep it all secret. It's dangerous work. Sarah. He didn't tell you because he wanted to keep you safe." I stared at her, my mind reeling. "So, he's not a criminal?" Lisa shook her head. "No, but the people he deals with, some of them are. If they found out about you, they could use you to get to him. That's why he kept it from you." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. All this time I'd thought David was a liar, maybe even a monster. But he was helping people? Saving them? It was too much to process. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because he's in trouble," Lisa said. "One of the groups he's working against found out about him. They're coming for him. And if you're with him, they'll come for you too." I went home, my head spinning. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to run to David, to tell him I understood, to help him. But another part of me was angry. Angry that he'd kept this from me. that he'd let me fall in love with a man who didn't fully exist. I felt betrayed, but I also felt guilty for doubting him. That night, David showed up at Emma's apartment. He looked desperate, his eyes red like he'd been crying. "Sarah," he said, "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Please let me explain everything." I let him in, and for the first time, he told me the truth. He'd been working with an underground network for years, helping women and children escape dangerous situations. The money, the trips, the secrecy. It was all part of keeping the operation safe. He'd wanted to tell me, but he was afraid I'd get hurt. "I love you, Sarah," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting you." I cried, not knowing if I was crying from relief or pain. "Why didn't you trust me?" I asked. "I could have handled it. I could have helped you." He shook his head. "I couldn't risk it. You're everything to me." We talked for hours, and by the end I was exhausted but clearer. David wasn't a criminal, but he was in danger. And so was I, just by being his wife. He begged me to leave town, to stay safe, but I couldn't just walk away. I loved him despite everything. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. David and I decided to stay together, but it wasn't easy. I moved back home, but things were different. The trust we'd had was broken, and we had to rebuild it piece by piece. David promised to be more open, to let me into his world, but he also warned me it wouldn't be safe. I didn't care. I wanted to be with him, to support him, even if it meant facing danger. We worked together to keep his operation going. I started helping with small tasks, organizing safe houses, passing messages. It was terrifying but also empowering. For the first time, I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. David and I grew closer, but the fear was always there, lurking in the background. One night, everything changed. David got a call that one of the safe houses had been compromised. He had to go, to help the people there. But I begged him to stay. "It's too dangerous," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Please, David, don't go." "I have to," he said, kissing me fiercely. "I'll be back. I promise." But he didn't come back. I waited all night, my phone clutched in my hand, but there was no word. By morning, Lisa called. "Sarah," she said, her voice shaking, "David's been taken. They found him." My world stopped. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Lisa told me to stay put, that she'd handle it, but I couldn't just sit there. I went to the police, told them everything I knew. They were skeptical at first, but Lisa backed me up, bringing proof of the organization's work. The police launched an investigation, and after days of agonizing waiting, they found David. He was alive, but barely. He'd been beaten, left in an abandoned building. When I saw him in the hospital, hooked up to machines, I broke down. He looked so fragile, so unlike the strong man I'd married. But he opened his eyes and smiled at me, weak but real. "I told you I'd come back," he whispered. David recovered, slowly but surely. The organization he worked for shut down temporarily, and we moved to a new city, starting over. It wasn't easy. We had to rebuild our lives, our trust, our love. But we did it together. I went back to school, finally becoming a teacher. David left the organization, finding work as a real photographer this time. We're not perfect, but we're honest with each other now, and that's enough. Looking back, I realize how much this journey changed me. I went from a naive girl who believed in fairy tale, love to a woman who knows love is messy, complicated and worth fighting for. I learned to trust my instincts, to ask questions, to stand up for myself. And I learned that sometimes the truth is painful, but it's also freeing. If you're watching this, maybe you're going through something similar, doubting someone you love, wondering if you can trust them. My advice is simple. Don't ignore your instincts. If something feels wrong, ask questions. The truth might hurt, but living in the dark hurts more. Be brave, be honest, and don't be afraid to seek help. You deserve to know the truth, and you deserve a love that's real. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it touched you in some way. If it did, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to my channel. I'll be sharing more stories about my life, my lessons, and my journey to help others find their strength. Let's keep this conversation going in the comments. Tell me your story, or just let me know you're here. Together we can support each other. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.